So when I was 6, my parents got divorced. My dad stayed at the church that I'd grown up in, where I would attend every other weekend when I was with him. And then my mom went church shopping. We visited countless churches in Brevard County, all the way from Titusville to West Melbourne, and many in between. We visited this place called East Coast Christian Center one time on North Courtney Parkway in Merritt Island around 1993. And at that time, it was the only building East Coast owned. The children's ministry building next door to the south was still an office building with some horrible Art Deco design on the outside. The building on the other side wasn't the chapel, it was a beauty school. There was no East Coast Cocoa and no East Coast Viera. In 1993, I was only 10 years old. East Coast Merritt Island looked a lot different than it does now, and I vividly remember there was a big wall dividing the sanctuary. There was adult church on one side and kids church on the other side. There were people playing tambourines and running in the aisles and people waving flags. It was a lot. I remember the sermon that day was about finances and giving money to tear down the wall to make a bigger space for adult church and then to buy the office building next door to make room for kids church spaces. Our visit that day ended up being one and done, as we decided as a family that it wasn't the church for us. The tambourines probably had something to do with it, the message about money probably had something to do with it, but ultimately God's timing had everything to do with it. One thing is, if we had stayed, I would have met Matt, my husband, when I was 10 and he was 14. And at 14, I've heard stories that he was not very nice to girls. Plus, at those ages, a 4-year age gap is massive and not acceptable. But I think back on that season and I think of all the people who were called to what is now East Coast Church, who decided to plant their roots deeply, who served, who stayed, and who sacrificially gave so that 7 years later, I could come back when I was 17. And when I came back, it was not to that same building that I went on that Sunday morning. It was actually to the office building next door, which East Coast now owned, and which was now home to the Mezzanine, a young adult church that Matt started. And then 3 years later, Matt and I got married in that church building I visited as a 10-year-old. The wall had been torn down. There was plenty of room for over 500 guests. 13 months later, we had our first baby, Reagan, and after he was 6 weeks old, I was able to check him into the nursery in that former office building because people were called to build a church for a girl like me and for you. We're all sitting in rooms right now, even if you're at home or in another state as part of our online community, because someone before us chose to partner with what God was doing here at East Coast, for me and for you. God knew when I was 10 years old that I would be back, and that I would get to walk into the fruit of someone else's obedience and sacrifice, and that I would, going on 25 years and counting now, get to sow seeds of obedient generosity into this house to continue building the legacy that was built for me. I don't know the name of the little girl just like me who's gonna walk in those doors and meet Jesus one day and find family. Maybe she's even here today, but it's my honor and my privilege to get to be a part of her story.